The man in the birch woods, the winter silence. The first snowfall had come early to northern Vermont. The small town of Hartwell was quiet that November, blanketed in white and wrapped in fog. Megan Price, a wildlife photographer from Boston, rented a small cabin deep in the Birch Woods Reserve, hoping to capture the stillness of winter for her portfolio. The cabin was simple but warm, surrounded by thin white trees that seemed to hum in the wind. Her first night was peaceful, until around 2 a.m. when her motion sensor camera went off. The photo it captured showed nothing unusual at first glance, just the birch trees and moonlight. But zooming in, she saw it, a tall silhouette standing between the trees facing her cabin. Its body was too long, its head tilted at an odd angle, and its hands, black against the snow, hung unnaturally low. The next night, the camera triggered again. The missing tracks. The next morning, Megan checked the fresh snow outside. No footprints, no tire marks, no sign of anyone having been there. She told herself it must have been a shadow, maybe even a branch swaying in the wind. Still, she moved one of her cameras deeper into the woods for a better shot. By dusk, the forest was unnervingly quiet. No birds, no crunching branches, just the faint sound of her own breathing beneath her scarf. When she returned to the cabin, she reviewed the new footage. The first clips were normal. The last one made her stomach twist. The camera had recorded her own cabin from afar, its window lit up, a shape moving inside. The problem was, she had been out there alone. She replayed the video, her fingers trembling. The shape moved just like her, but it wasn't wearing her coat. The birch markings. Megan decided to hike out to retrieve the camera the next morning. The forest was still, the air sharp and cold. As she neared the spot, she noticed something strange. Every birch tree around the camera had fresh carvings on them, vertical slashes, uneven but deliberate, as if made by long nails. One tree bore something worse, a drawing of a human figure, tall and faceless, etched deep into the bark. The figure had long black lines for arms and small circles for eyes. When she reached for the camera, she realized it was gone, just the tripod remained. That's when she heard it, a low creak of snow behind her. She spun around, expecting an animal. Instead, she saw a tree she didn't recognize before, one with a shadow behind it that didn't move with the wind. It was standing too still. The doubt creeps in that night. The wind howled like something alive. Megan sat by the fire, clutching her phone. No signal. She tried to convince herself she was just tired. She recorded an audio journal for her documentary. Day 3, minor disturbances, probably wind patterns or animals. Then something knocked on the wall outside. Once, twice, 3 times. She froze, staring at the door. Probably. The wind, she whispered, though her voice cracked. The knocking stopped. But minutes later, she heard footsteps crunching in the snow, slow, heavy, circling the cabin. She turned off the lamp, crouched near the window. Out there between the birch trees, she saw it, tall, grey, almost blending into the bark. It turned its head sharply toward her window. The last thing she saw before she ducked was its hand sliding along the cabin wall, leaving behind a smear of something dark. The knock returns. Megan barely slept. When morning came, she packed her gear and decided to leave immediately. But when she stepped outside, she froze. The snow around her cabin was covered in footprints. Not boot prints, bare feet. Dozens of them, circling the cabin in uneven rings. Each one pressed deep into the snow, as if whoever made them had stood there for hours. Her camera bag was gone, replaced by something sitting in the snow. Her missing camera lens cracked. When she turned it on, there was only one new recording. The footage showed her sleeping inside the cabin, the window in frame. A faint shape moved outside, tall still, staring in. It stayed there for the entire 2-hour clip. Then, near the end, the camera tilted slightly as if it had been lifted. From behind the lens, a deep whisper said, "Smile." The final frame, when rangers finally found Megan's cabin days later, the fire had gone cold. Her car was still there, packed and ready. But she was gone. They searched for days through the birch woods, finding only her broken camera buried beneath a tree root. The last image on the SD card was blurred but haunting, a photo of the forest at night. Between 2 birch trees stood something that looked almost human, but the skin was pale as bark, the limbs impossibly long. Locals say strange things have always happened in those woods. At night, when the wind moves through the birch trees, it sounds like breathing. Some claim they've seen figures standing among the trunks, watching, waiting. And every winter, hikers find the same markings carved into the trees. A single figure, 2 circles for eyes, and beneath it the faintest word, scratched deep into the bark, smile. The Howling Cabin. The cabin in the pines, when Evan Miller, a 29-year-old forestry student from Montana State, took a winter research job deep in the Gallatin National Forest. He thought it would be peaceful, a week alone collecting wildlife data. The state had assigned him a hunting cabin built in the 1940s, perched near a frozen creek. The first night felt serene. Snow muffled every sound and the trees shimmered beneath a full moon. He brewed coffee, sat by the wood stove and listened to the gentle hiss of the fire. But as the clock neared midnight, a sound pierced the quiet, a long, drawn-out howl. Not a wolf's, too deep, too human. He stepped outside with his flashlight, breath fogging in the cold. The forest was still. Then, from the dark tree line, came another sound. This time it whispered his name. Faramita. The first sign Evan convinced himself it was the wind.
Things
But the next morning,
in his cabin.
strange things started happening. His wildlife sensors, set to detect animal movement, had all triggered around 2:13 a.m., though they recorded no visible movement. The readings showed large body mass, heavy breathing. He walked the perimeter to check his equipment and found enormous prints in the snow, human-shaped, barefoot, each toe sharp and pointed. He followed them until they simply stopped. No drag marks, no jump-off point, just gone. That night the howling came again, closer. Evan locked the door, pulled the curtains shut and kept his hunting rifle nearby. But then he heard footsteps on the porch, slow, dragging, deliberate. He peered through the curtain. Nothing. Then, when he looked again, someone had pressed a bloody handprint against the glass from the outside. The woods watch back by the third night, Evan hadn't slept. Every sound in the forest made his pulse spike. The howls had become rhythmic, almost like calls answered by others in the distance. He decided to set up his camera traps around the cabin, determined to prove what he was hearing. At dawn, he reviewed the footage. The first clips showed deer, squirrels, normal, but the last one froze him cold. At 3:02 a.m., the camera recorded a tall figure emerging from the trees, moving in a jerky, unnatural gait. Its skin was pale gray, its limbs too long, the head tilted backward as if broken. The worst part, when it reached the cabin door, it looked directly into the lens. Its face was stretched, eyeless, its mouth open too wide, howling silently. The timestamp showed it had stood there for over 7 minutes, just listening. Doubt and desperation, Evan radioed the ranger station. No response. Static hissed through the speaker, followed by faint breathing. He unplugged it immediately. That evening the wind died, leaving the forest eerily still. He started a fire and sat in silence, clutching his rifle. Suddenly, from the loft above him, he heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps, soft creaking boards, pacing slowly back and forth. His body went rigid. He hadn't gone upstairs since he arrived. The cabin shouldn't have anyone up there. The steps stopped. Then a voice, raspy, distorted, whispered his own words back to him. "It's just the wind." Evan pointed his flashlight up the ladder. No one was there, but carved into the beam above were 3 words that hadn't been there before. "We never left." The howling returns panic took over. Evan packed his gear, ready to hike out by dawn. But when he stepped outside, every path was gone, buried in snow. The forest looked different, rearranged somehow. He tried using his compass. The needle spun wildly. That's when he heard them again, the howls. Dozens this time, echoing through the trees, layered and distorted. He ran for the truck, only to find the windshield shattered from the inside. The driver's seat was soaked, as though someone had sat there dripping wet. A noise came from behind the truck, a slow, dragging crunch of snow. He turned and saw them, tall, pale shapes standing between the pines. Their heads tilted, their mouths opened, releasing a chorus of howls so loud the air vibrated. Then silence. Every figure vanished. But behind him something breathed. The final tape. When a search team arrived a week later, they found the cabin door wide open, the stove still burning. Evan's belongings were scattered. His camera was found half buried in snow outside the porch. The final video showed him recording himself, whispering, "It's not human. It sounds like them, but it's not. In the background, faint shapes shifted in the tree line. Then the camera fell and a deep voice murmured, "Stay." The file ended with a single frame, a still image of the cabin from a distance. In the window stood a tall grey figure, head tilted backward, staring out. Locals who hike near the Gallatin forest say that on silent winter nights you can still hear the howls. Some swear it sounds almost human, calling names that no one should know. And if it ever calls yours, don't answer. The Vanishing Trail. The Silent Pines Trail in the heart of southern Oregon's Umpqua National Forest. 32-year-old hiker Lena Hart began her 3-day solo backpacking trip along the lesser-known Silent Pines Trail. Locals had warned her it was poorly maintained, but Lena loved the quiet. No crowds, no phone signal. Just the crunch of her boots and the scent of pine needles. The first day was calm. She camped beside a stream, recorded notes for her hiking vlog, and admired how the mist rolled through the trees like ghosts at dusk. But that night, as she drifted to sleep, she heard it, a faint whistling coming from the woods. Not an animal. It sounded like someone trying to copy a tune, low and slow. She unzipped her tent, flashlight trembling in her hand. The whistling stopped. Then from deep in the trees, the same tune whistled back. Closer this time. Footprints in the moss by morning, the forest was unnaturally still. Even the birds had gone quiet. Lena shook off the unease, packed up, and continued deeper down the trail. About an hour in, she noticed something odd. The moss on the rocks and trees had faint impressions in it. Footprints, barefoot, dozens of them, weaving between trees, circling her trail. They looked fresh. She knelt to take a photo, but the prints seemed to fade as she stared, as if the moss was swallowing them. Around noon, she reached an old wooden sign half buried in dirt. Silent Pines Trail closed, 1984. The sign looked decades old, clawed at, splintered. That night, while reviewing her footage in the tent, she heard the same whistling again. But this time another sound joined in, a deep, wet breathing just outside the tent wall. The voices of the woods. The next morning, Lena found the area around her camp disturbed. Her food bag was torn, but not by any animal she recognized. Long drag marks stretched through the dirt, ending at the tree line. She packed quickly and hiked back toward the trailhead, but the path didn't look right anymore. Fallen logs and branches she didn't remember. The moss-covered trees all looked the same. She turned on her GPS, no signal. Her compass spun in circles. As she tried to steady her nerves, she began to hear faint voices carried by the wind. At first she thought it was her imagination. Then she heard her own voice from somewhere in the woods calling, "This way!" She froze. The voice was exact, even her tone, but it came from behind her. The lost hour by afternoon, Lena was exhausted and scared. She checked her watch, 4:12 p.m. The sun was dipping. She pressed on, marking trees with red tape so she could trace her path. But after hiking for what felt like an hour, she looked up and saw the same red tape hanging right in front of her. She'd gone in a circle. The forest seemed to shift when she wasn't looking. The air grew heavy, colder, as if something was watching from the dark between the trees. She found a clearing and set up camp before sundown. When night came, she made a small fire. The whistling returned, fainter, circling. Her fire flickered violently, and for a moment she saw shapes moving between the trees. Tall, thin figures, skin the color of ash. Then one of them began to whistle her tune back perfectly. The vanishing path panicked. Lena grabbed her camera and ran. The forest seemed endless, her light cutting through a maze of branches and fog. Every direction looked the same. She stumbled onto an old logging road, half overgrown with moss. Relief washed over her until she saw movement ahead. A person standing still.
"Hello?"
she called. The figure turned. It was her. Same clothes, same backpack, but her double's eyes were hollow and dark, her mouth twisted into a grin. The thing raised one hand, palm facing her. Then it whistled. Lena screamed and bolted into the trees, branches tearing her jacket. She didn't stop running until she saw a faint orange glow, a ranger's outpost in the distance. She sprinted toward it, sobbing with relief. But when she reached the door, the building was empty, cold and covered in dust. The last recording 2 weeks later, A search team found Lena's tent near the Silent Pines Trail, but not her. Her camera was discovered wedged in the roots of a tree, still recording. The final clip showed her running through the forest, whispering, "It's following me." Then the camera fell. For several minutes, only the sound of the wind played. Finally, something picked up the camera. A grey, elongated hand. The lens tilted up to reveal the forest floor and faint impressions of bare feet circling the camera. Then a face, pale and wrong, leaning into the frame. It smiled before the video cut to static. Local rangers say they still hear whistling there at night. And sometimes hikers claim they see a woman deep in the woods, waving for help, until they realize her eyes are just empty shadows.